Our guest this evening is Craig Thompson, K9CT, who is from Peoria-ish, Illinois. I first met Craig. Don Wilbanks and I were invited to come speak at the Peoria Hamfest on behalf of Ham Nation and Amateur Radio Newsline. And afterwards, we all went out to Craig's contest station and drooled a lot. Craig is he's a top-level contester, also a top-level DXPeditioner, and a member of the advisory board for Amateur Radio Newsline. So there. So I invited Craig tonight to talk to us about the DXPedition that happened to Pitcairn Island, because it's always fascinating to hear about these things from somebody who actually did them rather than just read about them secondhand. So I am going to turn this over now to Craig Thompson, K9CT.
There, can you see it?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. And you know, if you got any questions, it's a small enough group that just ask it, because it's the best time to do it while I'm still thinking about it. I've got a lot of slides, and what I'm going to do, I'll tell you a little story. We'll talk about the DXPedition. We actually did a contest in the middle of the DXPedition, and I'll take you on a little sightseeing tour, and then I'll bring you home. So that's kind of what's going to happen. And if you hang around at the end, you'll see some really beautiful scenery that you won't see probably in Illinois or Indiana. So anyhow, I'm sure that most of you know the story of Pitcairn. Oh, by the way, notice those nice symbols there. We had our own icon, and I put your icon there right next to it of your club. This is actually Pitcairn Island. And we, after having just gone to Beauvais Island and failed due to all kinds of disastrous things down by Antarctica, the team was looking for a better and easier place to go. And so we were looking for warmer weather, at least some people on the island, and somewhat easier transportation than traveling by boat for 31 days than we did for Beauvais. We also took some newbies, which was fun. A couple of symbols of the island in New Zealand. The story, of course, and why Pitcairn even came to be is Mutiny on the Bounty. And the Bounty was on its way to these islands, the Polynesian islands, to find this fruit. It's the breadfruit plant. And one of the first things we had to do is find out where's this breadfruit, because I'm sure none of you have ever had breadfruit, or if you have, it'd be an unusual experience. But anyhow, they were sent to Tahiti to go get the fruits or the plants. And they had a demanding and cruel captain that you probably heard of, Captain Bligh. And if you've ever read the story or seen the movie, you'll find out that Fletcher Christian was pretty unhappy about things, him and several guys, and they mutinied and took the ship and sent the captain away on one of the smaller boats. And he, unfortunately, for their sake, made it all the way back to England. And it makes for quite a story in a movie. What happened is Fletcher Christian knew that he was in big trouble. And so they decided they better go find an island that kind of was off the radar, although radar in 1808 was, or 1792, which when he landed there didn't exist. But anyhow, he ended up landing on Pitcairn. Him and a few people. They actually had a party on the boat the day they were leaving. They were near Tahiti, and they invited some ladies on there, single ladies, and they just didn't let them go back to shore and said, we're off. And so them and their ladies headed to inevitably Pitcairn. So anyhow, long story short, actually in 1808, the Americans discovered the only one of the original mutineers name was John Adams. The rest had killed each other, fighting over the women, fighting with themselves. And in fact, the women killed some of the men. They didn't like them at all. And so there was only one mutineer left by 1808. So what's interesting, because of the children that they had, there's a lot of people that are descendants that we got to meet. So this is where it's located, and you'll see up here's North America, and it's Pitcairn is halfway between the Panama Canal and New Zealand down here. So the reason that that's important is because ships would stop there and bring food and supplies and give the crews a break if they were going through the Panama Canal or from this area. This is what the boat that we went on, the Braveheart. And if many of you probably heard, when we go on DXPeditions, I've been on a few on this boat. This is a ham radio kind of a mecca. There's been a lot of famous DXPeditions that have been done from this boat, and the captain and his crew have always treated us well. This was the current population of Pitcairn when we got there. There were 19 men, 15 women, and 3 children. And what's interesting is a lot of them were actually outsiders. So when we went as a DXPedition, you'd say, well, who really needs to work it? It's not that uncommon. In fact, there's some people on the natives on the island. Actually, some of them are ham radio operators, and there actually are some famous ones that were there. But it's actually still needed by a lot of people. And if you've ever heard of DXPedition or anything like that, a lot of hams, it's kind of like the entertainment. They just chase them all over the bands. They try to work them on every band and mode that they possibly can, and it just creates entertainment, usually for a couple of weeks. So that's usually what happens. So here's some of the QSL cards, and we actually use the old radio site. This is VP6PAC. This club still exists, but the station is really non-functional. Tom Christian, this is the famous ham. How many of you have a Tom Christian QSL card or had a QSO with Tom Christian? No?
I do.
Okay, good. Good, Jerry. What was really cool, I had a chance to meet him. He, before he died, I believe in 2011, went to Dayton and met a lot of people, walked around, and then shortly thereafter he returned to the island and didn't last much longer. But him and his wife were active. If you notice where the picture is being taken here, this is a very famous location on the island. This is Bounty Bay, and that's where they slide the boats, the long boats, in and out. And this is actually this is Tom's wife Betty, and she's no longer living either. But they were actually traveling together. And I have Tom Christian's card over here at my desk. This is Dave Brown. He lives on the island. He's still there, and he's still, that you can see in his hand. And of course, Meralda Warren, she's active today. We met her. We actually gave her a radio and one of the antennas that we used and set it up for her so she could be active every day. And she's on almost every day. She's on Facebook, and you can make if you just want to talk to her sometime, she'd be glad to do that. But this is actually, she hosted us for when we were done operating and we were setting up her station. She hosted us for cake and coffee and that sort of thing, and visiting for a while. And then Brian Young, he also still living on the island. And so anyhow, you'll see that that's VR6BX, and VP6DX is the current call. And I work both VR6TC and VP6TC. They just changed the prefix. Here's a lot of the QSL cards from some of the people that have been there. So the Japanese were there in '93. This is their card. This is OH2BR. He operated all by himself for 3 months and made over 56,000 QSOs. And another JAQ operator was there in 2008. And then the Clipperton DX group, which is an organized group of actually several famous hams. That's Michelle there in the middle with the beard. Actually, you may have worked him when he was on Martinique. I've been on the DXPedition with Michelle before. We went to Amsterdam Island out in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And here's another European group here. So anyhow, who needs it? It was on Club Log. I'm sure you've all heard of Club Log. This is the 67th most wanted. And hopefully by the time we were done, it was less needed, maybe 100th now, after we worked as many as we did. So our goals, we always have a goal when we do. Number one is always to have fun. And then, we knew in particular that a lot of people would need, for DXCC, the low bands, in particular 160 and 80 meters. But of course, there's some people that worked it for the first time ever on any band. So we got a lot of support. We were allowed to stay at Andy Christian Home, which is 7th generation from Fletcher Christian. And of course, Fletcher Christian was the leader mutineer, and Andy was our host. And we also operated from the old radio site. And so you can see the different things that we did. We did a lot of advanced planning, and everybody that's on a team that goes on a DXPedition has a job to do. And you can see what I did. I own a company in Peoria, and in our parking lot there adjacent to the building, I have the containers we used to go to Beauvais Island and to also to Pitcairn Island to ship all the gear. It's quite a process, actually. So I did all of the Flex radio setup, testing, N1MM integration, and all the QSL cards. And I act as a treasurer because I have a 501c3F that I use for DXPeditioning, so that everything is tax-free. And we have a tax ID number, although it requires a little work because you got to file a form every year. This was the team we put together. Alan, EA3HSO, maybe some of you worked Alan before. He's a great phone operator. He's a happy guy, you can tell from the picture, but he was a newbie on a DXPedition. Nodir from Tajikistan. I have traveled with him on 2 or 3 DXPeditions now. He's well known on 160, and he's a great photographer. And Hal, we'd gone to Beauvais together, and Ralph's, he actually is a very honored person in terms of the DX world. He's on the honor roll plus. He's something else. He was our leader on several DXPeditions, especially to a lot of the icy locations. Pat Kane was a brand new operator. Myself, of course, Mike from Indiana. George, N4GRN, did a lot of our logistics. Arnie was our team doctor, N6 Hotel Charlie. In fact, he's probably going to be a speaker at W9DXCC, and he's been on a lot of DXPeditions, and he's got a lot of stories to tell about some of the medical things that he's had to do, because we're out in the middle of nowhere without any help. And Hawk, SM5AQD, we've been on several DXPeditions together. Glenn Johnson, W0GJ, who doesn't live too far from me in Iowa. Mike was a newbie, W0 Victor Tango Tango. Greg, W6IZT, we've been on many trips, and of course Hal, W8HC, all just super guys, a lot of fun to be around. That's one of the keys, by the way, to putting a team together. You have to have people that you can hang around with very closely for a long time and get along with each other. Of course, advanced planning, all the things that we had to do, we had to get gear, amplifiers, antennas, and of course we had a lot of this prepared because of our previous DXPeditions. So we, obviously, all the logistics that we had to do, we got together about date and time 2 years ago, and we had everything packed so that it was in a container and ready to go by June 1st, so it could make it all the way to New Zealand. So we had a packing party. We did everything you have to do to get everything through customs. This is what it looks like. All the gear that we have, we unloaded everything out of the containers and then repacked it in just like this to be shipped. And in fact, that's what the gear looked like, both going and coming back. It was amazing how well, because once we pack it up, we no longer handle it until we are actually setting up our gear on the island. So you're trusting a lot of people for a very long time. Total cost of the DXPedition was $126,000. K0I, Ralph, had contacted a lot of major foundations for support. And also every operator was expected to contribute. We always contribute at least half of the DXPedition cost. And it's always amazing how much money is raised by clubs and foundations and individual hands. So this is how we made our trip. So in our case, we flew to Minneapolis so I could fly together with some other guys. And then we flew to LAX, had a 3-hour layover at midnight, then flew for 8 hours to Tahiti, arriving about 5 in the morning. Stayed at 2 nights in the Tahiti airport motel because we wanted to make sure we were there and acclimated to the time change so we could get up at like 4 in the morning for the flight to Mangareva. Mangareva is an island about 2/3 of the way to Pitcairn, and from there on we had to take a boat. We took a ferry boat into Mangareva and got on the Braveheart, and then it took 34 hours by boat to Pitcairn Island. And of course, you have to reverse this process to get back. So when we said easy transportation, yes, you can get there, but it's not just snap your fingers and go. So here we are in Minneapolis, pretty happy. And you can see this is where we're going to. There's Tahiti. And I just point out something about Polynesia here. You've heard of Tahiti probably because you're probably thinking umbrellas and those little Quonset hut things or whatever, not Quonset hut, but little things that they put out in the middle of the water that you can sit with your wife and you can have cocktails and all that stuff. That doesn't really happen in Tahiti. There's an island just offshore that a lot of people go to, and they actually have a nice resort there. So you can fly to Tahiti and go to that island. A lot of people like to. But of the Polynesian islands, they're organized kind of by counties. So that's what I would say. But of course it's French, and you'll see right above it is that's one county, we'll call it. And you can see another arc over here to the right. That's another county. Then another one up here, the Marquesas. And then down here, the Gambier, which is actually where Mangareva is down here. So there's the airport we stayed at. That's the view from the airport or the hotel. And you can see it's all water. And actually to the left is that island I was telling you about that's got a huge resort. And then we did a little shopping. We actually found some breadfruit. Aha. And so then we made our flight, made a little stop here. And we ended up here. Now there's 4 islands that make up the Pitcairn Islands. So the Owino, Pitcairn, Henderson, and Ducie. And Ducie is actually a separate entity for DXCC. This is what it looked like in Mangareva as we arrived. And of course, this is just a Polynesian village. Everybody's very French and friendly. Very nice people. And that's the captain, Nigel's son, Matt, and his son. And that was his first time his son had ever been on a boat, and also his wife, which is amazing. But anyhow, that's just a side story. This was our first view very early in the morning. The sun was just coming up. You can see the fog. That's Bounty Bay right there. And there's a village right up in here that we could see. And then, so if we look down, Bounty Bay is where my mouse is. And there's this village right here. So here we are. They come out with the longboats, and they helped us unload. And all of the gear that was in the container has already been delivered by the Braveheart about 2 months earlier and put up at the station location. So all we had to do is bring our personal gear. And here we are. And you'll notice one person is hurt, actually. He had really got, and I mean, he got hurt bad. And he actually should have just stayed on the boat and gone back to Mangareva. And ultimately, he ended up going back anyhow. But that was the whole team getting ready to go right there. So our site, in other words, we landed down here. We had to go all the way up to here to operate. And then the radio site was going to be here. So you can see where Andy's house is there. It's just very nice ham radio location, very nice hill, way up high and clear in all directions. So here we are. This shows you, this is actually when they were bringing the antennas and all that kind of stuff on prior, a month or 2 earlier. But anyhow, they hauled all that stuff up, and they had 4-wheelers everywhere. You can see one to the right in this picture. But this was the picture of when the gear all arrived. And when we arrived, this was now our bedroom. So you can see all the Pelican cases, all the wire. We put a lot of coax in these sort of, these garbage cans. I call them that, plastic containers, because you can just coil them up and just lay them in there, and it's very neat. And then you can slide stuff down the core. And we did the same thing with a lot of our power cables. So that's what it looked like. Those were all amplifiers on the left, 1500 watt amplifiers. And of course, all the flex radios, the maestros, headphones, paddles, computers, everything are in all those Pelican cases. This was a 160-meter antenna, and all of the other tubes over there are actually 3-element Yagis. And we had fence posts that we brought so we could have for beverage antennas. We had tilt over bases. And here's the actual operating. When we operated at Andy's house, we brought it over from that, what I call garage or sleeping area, and we brought it over into this side, and he had a completely open area where you could probably have like a family gathering or anything you want, set up tables or chairs or even play music and dance, I suppose. His house was used kind of as an open area where people could meet and gather. So we use this as our station, one of our station locations. And this is what it looks like from the outside looking into that room. So we had a great view. When we looked out there, we were looking right at Bounty Bay. This is the kitchen that he had set up for us. And this is one set of bedrooms at the second level. And so you can kind of get a picture of what it's like. Now, you can see in the distance the radio site, and that's the old radio site I told you but that was actually originally a World War II military base. And so this is the way this is actually a short video, show you what it's like with the red mud, the volcanic mud. You can see it was a little slick. So we had a lot of that we had to deal with. That was not unusual for a little rain every day. And you're going to see it got pretty wet and slippery. But anyhow, our first day, we put up 5 Yagis for 10 through 20 meters. Of course, that's 10, 12, 15, 17, and 20. We set up verticals for 30 and 40 meters at Andy's house. We had 4 stations set up and we were ready to operate. The first QSO was N7XM. So it didn't take us long. We arrived 5 o'clock in the morning. And that night, before it got dark, we were on the air. So the first night we operated 20, 30, and 40. And here we are putting together the antennas. These are K5GO design, and you may not know K5GO, but he's a great contester and he's a great antenna designer. He had actually started an aluminum supply company, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, and DX Engineering ended up buying it. But here we are just putting a lot together. You can just see we're putting antennas together. It's a great idea. Lay down a canvas, because if you lose any bolts, you're not losing them in the grass. I'm sure you know that from field day. It's easy to lose something. So here we are, just one by one, setting up every one of the antennas. Notice the tilt up, every one of them. We actually, DX Engineering made those for us, and we had designed them for Beauvais. They all snap together. Now go 30 feet high. That's how you can rotate them. Then we tie a rope to the antenna and just rotate it. And so you can see how you tilt that up. And of course, you probably know that as a falling derrick, right? And you've probably done that at your field day. But every one of those was falling derrick, and you can see how they just snap together. It's a great design. You could make them yourself. We actually we had a 6-meter antenna. This is a 6M9. It's actually a special 6M9, but it's a M² antenna that we use on 6 meters, and you could elevate it, and we worked many stations off the moon. We didn't work anybody on tropo. We worked we worked them off the moon. So here it is, actually aimed at the moon. This is our power. Now the island had power. They had 3 huge generators, and each day they used a different generator, so that then they would do maintenance every day on the odd generators. And so they'd start the power at 6 in the morning, and they'd shut it off at 10 o'clock at night. And then our power had to be up and going. We soon learned that was inconvenient. It was nice to have local power, but it's better to not have your operation interrupted. So we just kept our own generators running all the time. So this is what our site looked like at Andy's house. And you can see all of the antennas. And they're all 3-element antennas. And they're, I remember I told you what they were, but that's like a vertical over here on the right for say 40 meters. There's another one for 30 meters. But we didn't do 80 or 160 at this site. we did it at this site. This is the old radio site I was telling you about. And the military actually had like a 200-foot tower. And I'm going to move this out of the way. And it was right here where this fenced in area, and it just had come down. But a lot of the existing towers that are here are really bad. And I'll show you in a minute. But that is actually the radio building right here that we operated from. And over here is just kind of a place where they stored, or store is the wrong word. It's just kind of a bunch of junk left over from the old days of having a station there. So this tells about it. It was built in 1940 during the war, and the military, really took this over. In 52, they had a Marconi transceiver there, and it was called Radio ZBP, Pitcairn Island. And this is actually the station. Look at the old radios. Look at, and the gear you're seeing here is actually the local clubs, but it was just completely unusable. It was covered up and everything, but you can see there was mold and just yuck. And of course, we had to clean this all up before we could use the place. And clean it we did. And but I mean, we weren't going to move the gear, but we cleaned up the floor and we cleaned up the spots. We had our own tables and chairs and brought everything in. That's a solar panel that's used with their weather station. But look at this. Isn't that cool? That's our station setup. You can see we cleaned the floor. We brought in our own tables, and we have, you can see this is a station right here. Everywhere there's a chair, there's a station. And on the left, I generally operated from this side. That was 80 meters generally all night. And this was 160 all night. And then over here, it could be 40, 30, 20. We had those antennas on this site. And we did mostly CW and some FT8 from this location. This is the weather station, and you can see the solar panels I had here. So if you were to find the weather for Pitcairn Island, this is where the weather information comes from. So I'm going to show you, this is a 90-foot tall, 160-foot vertical, and what it has a top hat on it in order to make it resonant. And we actually have two of those. We only brought one along, but we had two with us when we went to Beauvais. And actually, they're in Peoria, Illinois, right now in that big trailer container I was telling you about. So anyhow, it's raised with a 40-foot falling derrick, and it does work. It is just an awesome antenna. So here it is up, but I'm going to show you. This is actually the test ground that when DX Engineering designed this and constructed this, this is how they tested it. And they put together a manual, and you can see it's fully set up here. Here's all the parts and pieces, and we actually laid it in our parking lot at my business to make sure everything was assembly manageable, to assemble it, because it had already traveled clear down to Antarctica and back in a container, got moved who knows how many times, and we were concerned because this is aluminum that something got bent. So here we are putting everything together, getting everything ready to go. You can see here it is laying it on the ground. And of course, it's fastened to its base, and those are insulated bases. And you can see all of the guys are attached. And here it is. Here's the falling derrick. See, that's about 30 foot tall right there. And we're going to pull on this to the right, and that's going to come up. So here, I'm going to show you a movie of that. This is kind of fun to watch. We got Glenn Johnson up here watching it. If you listen carefully, you can hear him yell at us.
Wow.
I tell you what, I remember that. I'm standing right here. This is me over here. And we were all listening carefully because we couldn't see if it was vertical or not. So Glenn was telling us left, right, pull, and everything. And we had it guide 4 ways. So what would happen is it couldn't fall over left or right. You know what I mean? So that's the great way to guide something, have a pre-guide so that it can't really bend over. So if you're working at putting up something like this, that's the way to do it. That's what it looked like after it was installed in a beautiful day. That's what it looks like on the ground. You can see all the radials here going off. That's what the plate looked like before it was actually used. You can see the nice insulators they made and the tilt base. And of course, the rebar that we used, we brought along to pound into the ground. You can see the matching system here. This is actually a LBS, a UA9 LBS makes this gear. And actually DX Engineering now sells it. Before that, EY8MM is good friends with the guy. And we had first used this at Amsterdam Island, not this particular gear, but similar things. And I was so pleased with the quality of everything that he had made. But anyhow, this is a matching system that we used to tune the 160. And it was just a beautiful antenna. This is what it looked like at night. And this is you can see how great a photographer EY8MM is. The long exposure with, and of course, there's no light. The only light we had was, of course, the lights you see in the shack. Look at the picture. Isn't that amazing? It's just gorgeous. So here we are. You can see the vertical here, and we had like I said, a 40-meter vertical, and we put up an 80-meter vertical. And the 80-meter I have actually put up myself. This is a spider pole. And you just take wire and you wrap it around this. And I'll show you this. Oh, this is part of the beverages. We had beverages to the North America and to Europe and to JA. And we could select them. This is an LBS thing. You could actually select them, and we split them between the two radios. So when he's on 160 and I'm on 80, we could both be listening to North America or Europe or JA independently at the same time you could be using even the same antenna. Pretty slick. So there you can see how it's pointed at JA. That's the distribution system that was used to split. So this is the beverages, and that is actually sitting on top of a rod, and that's PVC. And those, I believe, are 1,100 feet long, very long. So here we are looking down. There's just a little bit more of a hill. So you can see this is the 160 antenna. And the 20 meters, so you can see we're standing up above. The shack is actually just below this hill. This is why we didn't use any existing towers. Would you climb that tower?
Yeah.
No way. I'm shocked that it's actually not collapsed. We had all that sea salt and wind. Amazing. Look at this one. How would you even think of climbing? There's nothing there. And they had left, there was an old antenna there at probably a TA33 or something like that. Anyhow, this is the base of the 160. Got an on here for impedance matching and to keep the RF off of the coax. And then of course, for all the radials going out. And by the way, all the radials are all pre-measured and wound before we get to any of these DXPeditions. So all we do is roll them out. And then when we're done, we actually roll them back so they're ready to go the next time we go out. We do that every single time. It'd be just like you do field day probably. So here's the 80-meter vertical, again, a spider pole. And when I do field day, I usually find a tree and I just guide it up along the tree. And then, and of course, everything's insulated anyhow. But it works really well on 80 meters. Here's the 40-meter vertical. Of course, the 30-meter vertical, putting together the 20-meter Yagi, which we ended up putting up this hill. There it is. We found out later that this monument here was actually dedicated to Andy's father. Andy, of course, was our host. We also have these plexiglass plates, and we've been using these for a number of years when we go on DXPeditions. And it's really great to have because you can see all the 10-meter antenna is actually where it says 10 meters. So, and there's only a few cables to plug in, and those come from the station, so you can't make a mistake. You can see that the 20 meters being used, or the 40s being used or something like that. So you can't make a mistake. And this is a great way to, of course, not have ground loops between stations because that's a non-insulated, it's a insulated plate. This is what it looked like at night when we were operating. And there was not very many bugs around. They didn't bother very much at all. I believe there was no mosquitoes at all. But anyhow, we ran 1500 watts. There's the radios. So I'm sure many of you know about gray line. And so when it was right here, that's where we were located. You could see the opposite side of the earth as to where the other, the opposite side of the earth is in Iran and that in the different zones. Again, another picture. So 160 we knew would be tough. The first night we made 714 Qs. And I can tell you that is remarkable. So we were very happy with the success of that antenna. We had people from Russia, all over Europe, just saying how great the signal was. Here we are. What we did to operate, we had 12 operators. So we had 3 4-man teams, and we alternated 3 and 4 hour shifts. And it allowed us to each get a chance to experience propagation at different times of the day. And every 3 or 4 days, then we would actually start all over again and get a chance to relive, the prior experience. So we all got a chance to take turns, operate at any station we wanted to operate at, and go from there. But you can see what a nice view. I'm going to show you here. This is how we got to see out the door. Isn't that beautiful out the window? This is how we work for FT8. Evidently, we go to sleep listening to it. We got a kick out of hell. He just fell asleep. Anyhow, here's the ops operating. That's myself standing there. What's that? Somebody say something? Anyhow, I'll show you the reason we operated here was there's supposed to be a low rain time. We operated it during October and we left in early November. So if you look, this is supposed to be how many inches of rain occur at that time of the year. So it was really a really good time to go. And look at the temperature variation. And I would say it's pretty much true. I don't know if it ever even got to 80 while we were there, but the lows every day were probably, in the 60s. And you could definitely tell the difference at night. It'd get chilly, but you could just wear a light jacket or a sweater or a sweatshirt and you were quite comfortable. So it's a very nice, you would think it'd get really hot, but there was the sea winds that keep it relatively cool. But no, the rains came. Take a look at that. And there we had rain, and boy, did we have rain. But we kept on operating. So we had all prepared for that. But look at the mud, volcanic soils of different colors, mostly red. And believe me, if you had anything that you didn't want to be red, you were out of luck. It was going to become red. And that's how you could get around that way. I didn't ever, other than being delivered there, I never rode one. I walked everywhere. And in fact, I don't know what's in that mud, but it'll eat the soles of your shoes out because I literally walked right out of the soles of my shoes. Thank goodness I brought some other shoes with me, but I wasn't the only one that suffered what that will do to you. They had to be very careful. Look at that red. Look at that. And that I actually had a pair of shoes. You can see his are already cut, but I lost the soles right off of mine. But I had another pair of shoes. Anyhow, this is what the storm is like. I'll let you experience it a little bit. So you could see we had quite a bit of water. Antennas came down. I mean, this is, things got bent. Nothing really got broken. I mean, nothing that we couldn't fix, but we suffered a lot, for a few days. But right after that happened was a CQ Worldwide, which is the last weekend of October, and it was a sideband contest. So we decided to stop. We had not operated on phone on 160 or 80 meters, so we knew that there would be a lot of people that would want to work us there. And So we just switched all the gear, took about a 2-hour break, and got everything set up for the contest and started operating the contest. Here's some of the guys. If you'll listen real carefully, this is them doing the contest right here.
November 5, Golf India, thank you. QR then, Victor Papa 6 Radio. Golf India 5 Papa, thank you. Victor Papa 6 Radio. Okay, the Zulu 2 again. Kilo Alpha 3, Papa Juliet X-ray. Kilo Alpha 7, Papa, Kilo Zulu 2 India, thank you. Victor Papa 6 Radio, QR then. Yourself, Papa Charlie X-ray, thank you. Kilo Alpha Hotel 5932.
There you got a chance to see what it's like. And first of all, we are a fairly rare DX location, but then we put it on in the contest. So everybody could actually work us again if they wanted to in the contest. And so we were having a ball. I got to tell you, we just had a ball doing this, and just like you would yourselves, if you were in this contest, it's just a lot of fun. Yeah. And one of the things that happened as a result of that is we ended up making 13.7 million for the score. We had over, in 48 hours, we made 8,128 QSOs, and we worked 155 zones, and you can see the different zones by band. We worked 419 countries, and you can see how many countries we worked per band. So we had a heck of a score. And keep in mind, this is when there's really very little sunspot activity. Look at how many contacts we made on 10 meters. 1,050 just in 48 hours. When's the last time you've heard 1,000 stations on 10 meters? It's been 5 or 6 years, maybe longer.
Yeah.
And look at 2,500 on 15. I mean, it's just unheard of. So we were very blessed, actually, in the time that we went to have the propagation we did. But I think a lot of that is trans-equatorial. We could hear around the equator, I'm going to actually talk about this in a minute, but we could actually hear Southern Europe almost any time. And it's because I think the MUF along the equator is so much higher than the rest of the Earth. And so here we were below the equator, and we could hear the United States. You know, when it was daylight in the United States, most of the time we could actually hear on almost any band. So this is when it was all cleaned up and you could actually read it. The other one was on the screen. But look at how we came out. 3830 is where contesters, after the end of the contest, they post this on this website. That 3830 used to mean that was the frequency you went to share your score with everybody in the contest. But they have it online now instead of getting on the air. And you'll see these are all European. This is PJ4, PJ2, V26, and that's Brazil. This is all Caribbean right here. That's Morocco, that's Canary Islands, that's Brazil, and that's Argentina. No, excuse me, Bulgaria. And then here we are. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We are 8th in the world on 3830. We were very, very excited about what we'd done. And of course, the other two here, that was England, and then that was Montserrat. So if you look, though, the official finish, the finish when CQ came out with the results, we came out 11th in the world. Now, if you look at this list, every one of those stations is a station that was put together to operate purposefully just for the contest. And here we were at DXPedition, kind of like field day setup. And K3LR and W3LPL are the top US stations, and you've heard of them before. Yeah. Look at how close their scores were. They duke it out. They have the best operators in the country, and we luckily were able to beat them. We could not believe that, our luck. It was just an amazing experience to be able to do that.
What did Tim have to say about that?
Well, of course, Tim and DX Engineering are a sponsor, so we never said much to them about it. But I think they were very proud because they had a hand in it. If you think about it, the antenna is the most important part of any ham radio station. And of course, I think the operating skills are also important. But he had a hand in our success. What's funny about this? we were having trouble with time. We were trying to link, as you can imagine, you're pretty sure of your time when you're operating in the United States. Your computer is corrected by your power line, or it's by a National Institute of Standards or time, or you can listen to WWV or whatever. And when we started this all out, we were linked GPS to the satellites. We had a link between here and here. And what was happening is we had to change for the contest. And because of that storm, we didn't realize that the link had been broken. And so this computer up here was off by like 3 or 4 hours, and we didn't know that. So we were having trouble with the time. So I sent a note. We did have internet, even though it was poor internet, we had internet, and you had to go to Andy's house to get to it. And we sent a note to the contest manager, and we said, we have a time issue. We're working at correcting it, but some of our times may be off. Please don't disqualify anybody that worked us, because if our time is off, they would have gotten disqualified. And they said, no problem, don't we understand totally. But I was able to get it corrected by editing and working on the logs, and submitted the score anyhow. So then almost within 4 hours of getting our score, they said, there's a rule that you have to meet. You have 2 separate sites, right? And it has to be within a circle. And I go, oh, shoot. That's not something that we had actually talked about or thought about when we were setting it up. I said, well, maybe we'll just be a check log then. And they said, no, well, check it and see where you came out. So what I did, the rule says you have to be within 500 meters. I measured it on Google Earth. It was 467.55. Talk about lucky. I couldn't believe it. I was sitting there sweating bullets at the table, trying to figure out if we had screwed up. But by 30 meters, we were safe. So what a coincidence. Anyhow, obviously you've seen the station, and here we are with all the rain and mud and everything, getting ready to pick it up. But here's just some pictures of us while we were sitting there operating. And that's Hal and Mikey the machine. We call him that because he just goes like crazy. He's a great operator. And of course, this is myself. He's a crazy guy too. No deer. A lot of people ask about 160, and I don't know if any of you guys like 160, but we are very proud of the fact that we'd worked 23% of our QSOs were Europe. Mm-hmm. So 921 of the 3,935 contacts were EU. The antipode, which is, remember the other side of the gray line? That's called the antipode. It's the opposite of the Earth from where we are. That's the hardest place to work anytime, anywhere. It's always the hardest place. It doesn't make any difference where you're at on the Earth. That's the hardest place. So we made 156 Qs on zone 16. Now this is on 160. And in history, there were only 5 contacts made before. So there was a lot of very happy hams on the other side of that path. Mm-hmm. And this talks about propagation and how it changes, and you need to be there all the time in order to take advantage of that. So if you're a serious contester, or a DXer, excuse me, this is a very meaningful lesson. And we found that out when we were on Amsterdam Island, because the antipode in the United States was in like Kansas and south of Kansas. So there was a lot of hams there that were on the antipode, and they had to be there every single day, waiting and waiting and waiting. And of course, this is what the station looked like. This is 160. That's the split. Look at how quiet it is. And of course, those bars down there below, that's a static crash. So, you know, if there's a storm anywhere it could be propagated from anywhere, that's a lightning crash. This is what happens when you're operating all night. That's no deer. This is me falling asleep. Who knew? You know, obviously I'm not taking a picture of myself. I never knew I fell asleep, but I obviously did. Interesting propagation. This is what I was telling you. Every day we could hear JA and BY until 7 o'clock at night. It was for us, that was amazing to hear that. But in the morning, when the sun would come up, every morning at 8 a.m., we could hear all of this Southern Europe, Northern Africa, almost continuously. and and then we'd work almost as soon as the sun hit the U.S., we could hear the U.S. all the way across the United States until about that would be about 6 o'clock local time, 7 o'clock local time, and then it would switch to JA. And of course, a similar experience. I'm not going to bore you with all of this unless you really want to know it. You could ask me if you want to know. But this is some different propagation, 30 meters, and you probably experience this yourself if you're on CW or FTA, which are the only two things that, or RIDI, I guess. You would notice that the band's really open all the time, almost everywhere. And but just look at this short period of time, all the different. It was open to Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, and South America, all at the same time, all within 5 minutes. Here's 5 minutes time, and all the continents we worked just on 30 meters. And that's really pretty normal for the band. It's just a matter of are guys on there or not. One of the things that we did for the very first time ever was get on 60 meters. It's never happened. And if you'll notice, we were using Fox and Hound, and we worked 900 cues on 60 meters, and it was all done FTA. And something interesting, this was our vertical, and you can see all the guys being worked almost all at once. And if you know some of those calls on there, I actually happens to be Dan, W5DNT down in Texas, and a good friend of mine, KC9EE, just in Morton, Illinois, happened to be working. That was just a screen grab. But look at the rate that you can work when you work Fox and Hound. Take a look at those numbers. The 10-minute rate was 537 QSOs an hour. Think about that. 392. So in an hour,
Wow.
383. That's how fast you can work guys in FT8 when you're using Fox and Hound. It's just an incredible rate. So anyhow, right now I'm going to take on a little bit of touring. And what we do is we get a break, we'd go for a walk, and we walk around and just see different sites that we could go. I quite often would go with No Deer and watch him take pictures. That's a Norfolk pine right in front of you. And there were about 2 or 3 times that the island was evacuated because they had run out of food. They were not able to sustain themselves. So they were transported. All of the inhabitants were transported to Norfolk Island, and they lived, so they would, all the Pitcairners then would be on that island, but inevitably they would start to come back again, and they would bring these Norfolk pines, which are obviously not native there, but you can see a few of them across the island. That's just a view of all of the lush land, and so a few homes here and there. That's just a shelter next to a trail. A lot of these places just are points. There's actually a name. There's actually a map. I don't have a copy of it here, but it's named over what has happened over the years, like Dan Falls or Bill died or something. You know, somebody fell off a cliff or something. It's just crazy. But everybody, that's what those people that live on the island. That's how they refer to those spots. Look at that red clay. It's beautiful. Look at the ocean, how clear it is. Look at that tree. I mean, just of course, and any picture, look at a beautiful sunrise, but what aren't you looking at the antennas?
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. I'm going to go through these rather quickly. They had a church there. They've always been a religious community. And this is an SDA. And so they would have services on Saturday morning. And I want you to notice to the right of the church after the rain, what do you see?
Rainbow.
A huge rainbow. And when this picture was taken, I was not with No Deer when he took this picture. I was up at Andy's place, and I've never seen a rainbow go from horizon to horizon. And it just was from one end of the island to the other. And I took a picture of it, but I could not believe it. My camera didn't do it justice like his does. But anyhow, on one day I came down and I sat in on their church service for a while and listened to what they did. And they had a pastor and his wife were there for 6 months from Portland, Oregon. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at that. Here, look at the sun setting and look at the sky. Isn't that amazing?
Helps to have a photographer with you.
Yeah, a really good one. You know, I can't, I dream about being a photographer like this. When we were on Amsterdam Island, he took so many pictures and they were so creative that he actually published a book. And it's just an amazing book. I would sit and watch him with Lightroom every day, messing around with photos and looking at them. Look at that. How you like that one?
Time lapse.
Isn't that beautiful? Of course, the Braveheart returns, thank goodness, to take us home. And here we are looking down on, that's called Adamstown. That's the village name. And of course, John Adams, if you remember, was the last person to survive. Look at the little crabs. Just kind of skip through some of these. I want to show you, this is called St. Paul's. And St. Paul's is a pool of water here, but it's actually moving very quickly. What happens is the water comes in off the ocean and splashes right through there. See that? And then if the sea is very active, if the water moves rapidly to your left and back out to sea. Now, when the ocean is very calm, they go down there and they can swim because there's really no beaches on Pitcairn. But a lot of times they'll go all the way across this trail. It's a couple miles away from Adamstown, and they'll go down here. But isn't that neat? Here we are. Actually, that's myself. Three of us here, and Nodir is actually standing here taking the picture of us walking down to St. Paul's. Look at that. And what happened is there was Andy's mom was caretaking a gentleman who was really near death the whole time we were there. And they had thought the last couple of years the guy was going to die anytime, but he would always be resilient and hang with it. And on the second to the last day we were there, on Friday, he died. And they have a tradition on the island that when somebody dies, they bury them before nightfall, and they start on the casket. All the islanders go to the wood shop and make the casket that day. So where this is all going, what happened is he had relatives on a Russian vessel that was actually returning from the island of Owino. And it was going to get in about 10 o'clock. So they thought they would wait and have the service the next day, so they kind of broke their tradition so that the relatives could all arrive together. And when they had the ceremony for the funeral, we all attended it. And we went to the gravesite, and this whale appeared in the ocean just as they were doing the service. And it was just amazing.
Wow.
Timing. So anyhow, I'll come back to that in a minute. But I just love these pictures. This is, look at the lighting.
It's amazing.
Look at that. Isn't that crazy?
Oh,
Don't you like that one?
yeah.
And look at this, is down the hill looking up at Andy's house. You couldn't miss it, of course, with that blue, the way he painted that. And then here we are. This is how we so if we wanted to operate at the radio station, we'd have to walk out and walk down this path and then walk, that 500 meters, but that's my line of sight. So it probably took us about 20 minutes to get there, and it was very slippery. So you had to be very careful, but that's how we did it every day. Well, actually every 3 or 4 hours, you had a shift, then you operated. This is Andy. He's Fletcher Christian's 7th generation. And what Andy would do on occasion, he'd say, "Hey, I'm having pizza." So you got 37 people on the island that would call him on their marine phone and say, I'd like to order a veggie supreme and I'll pick it up. And he'd say, be here in 30 minutes. And so he has a pizza oven to die for. So he would make all these pizzas. He was very proud of that. And here he is. So what I had done, I have a tradition at my station at K9CT. When we do a contest, at the end of the contest, I take all of the operators and we go to the local pizza place and I buy pizzas for everybody and beer for everybody. And I said to Andy, I said, would you make pizzas and we could get beer for everybody at the end of the contest? So here he is making our celebratory pizza. So we were just having a ball watching him make it. Boy, I tell you, those, don't they look good? Because they were. That's crazy, Andy. And here he is on the last night. He cooks a steak and brats. And I tell you, it was, I don't know how many guys he thought that he was serving, but there was more food than there were people. And we had tons of food. So anyhow, some more shots of us operating. That's myself, obviously, with the bald head. Oh, that's Glenn with the bald head too, just behind me. And we both use flex radio a lot in our stations. That's N6AC HC, Arnie, the doctor. That's Hawk, who's just a character. And EA3HSO, Alan. Hal, W8HC. W0VTT, Mike. And Pat, K0 Papa Charlie. And of course, Glenn Johnson again, myself. Oh, look at there.
Nice.
Isn't that something? Little Galapagos type turtle. It's the only one on the island. I think at one time there were two, but they have hives for honey. And right in that area is where this tortoise hangs out. And you can just easily kind of dig through the bush. You can actually see kind of where she's been crawling around because you can see the path. And so you can find her. But there's a lot of berries and that sort of thing in that area that she likes to eat. But you can order the honey. It's the purest honey you'll ever have because they have no insecticides or anything like that on the herbicides, anything like that. And it's a very pure honey, and it's right in this area. Here we are, just some scenes from, here we are taking everything down. There we are helping Maralda with a 20-meter vertical. Here's the honey. This is actually the Bounty's anchor. There's a lot of things like that. This was her cannon. If you remember right, when they came ashore, they wanted to show no evidence, so they burned the boat, and then it sank. And of course, all of this was retrievable because and over years they've retrieved a lot of the things from the bottom. And so they had the funeral. They had a funeral dinner, and they had a going away dinner for us. Everybody brought food. They shared it with us. And we had a going away party. And a lot of the people that are to the left here are not natives. They were people that are on the boat that brought the relatives. And a lot of the natives are sitting over here at the right, the Pitcairners. And we were like special guests seated up here at the front at the table. Here's Tom Christian's grave. And actually, really the only reason we would have ended up here was because right next to him is where the person was buried that we attended his funeral. So anyhow, back to ham radio. We ended up, interesting, some comments here. Look at the breakdown. We didn't work any RIDI at all. The only JT65 we worked was on EME. So we had 60 QSOs on 6 meters. FT8, look at all the QSOs, 30% of them, 24,273 QSOs on FT8. So, and then CW was most of them. And the reason that these are the highest percentage is because of the propagation. That'll get through a lot easier than any phone. Of course, we worked a lot of phone because of the contest. Continents by band, look at Europe, almost 21%. We were very proud of that because it's very far away. North America had 52%. You can see it over here. So a significant amount of North America, almost 43,000 Qs. Here's the whole team. We're in our shirts with our symbol on it. All of the countries represented on our team. And the NCDXF It's a foundation. Actually, I'm on the board of that foundation, and so is Glenn. And Flex Radio, who donated all the radios that we used. DX Engineering, we all signed the sign and sent it back to the, they signed a sign and sent it to us, and we signed a sign and sent it back to them. So it's hanging someplace. Here we are departing. You can see there's Bounty Bay right there. And here we are leaving the island. And look at how crystal clear it is after the arrival in the shrouded in fog. And here we are in the Braveheart looking back, getting smaller and smaller in the distance. And of course, I'd like to thank all these people for everything they did. We just couldn't do it without them. But I want to show you a short video at the end here. Maybe, did any of you ever see any of these?
Sure.
I'm sure you have. So here's the video I want. It just take a couple minutes to watch, and it kind of sews everything together.
Okay.
If you go up to Britain, we got to the all around. Every island but you were the town of Pretty Crown. Will you make it good?
Oh,
It's all town. Will you make it good? Never even know when town. Way down on the ocean, down is Florida. Every foul is loose, so come out, get out to sky. Will you make it? The apples on the will you make it kick? Never even know when out on a bed and endless start to flow. Was a time when the fish begin to go.
Kilo Echo 5 Bravo Romeo 5 and 9. Thank you.
November 3, Tango India.
You ready to go to the crazy? Come here, old southern town. Never even know when town. Come here, old southern town. Never even know when
My friend.
So with that, thank you very much for hosting tonight. It's been my pleasure to see you guys, and be glad to answer any more questions.
That was, those are a lot of work, but I mean, and clearly much nicer conditions than had you gotten to Bouvet.
Oh, yes. Oh, clearly. Night and day difference.
Yeah. That house, the view from that house was gorgeous.
Yep. Especially when it wasn't raining.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just like any bad storm anywhere. So.
Thank you very much for the presentation. And how was the fellow that was ill? Was he okay?
Yeah, you know, I mean, he's okay now, but he actually was a lot worse. He was in terrible shape, and he didn't realize how bad until he was examined. They actually had a medical doctor on the island, so they brought him to the clinic right away.
Uh-huh.
And there was a boat that came by in 3 days, and he was ordered off the island.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they
What
took
was
him
wrong
back.
with him?
Well, actually, several things. He fell, and I mean, not only he broke some ribs, clavicle. There was something wrong with his head. You know, he hit his head. What had happened? He just fell right on the ship,
Oh,
and it was just and you know, everything is hard metal. I've had this happen. We went to Swains Island, and we had a German fellow, and I swear, in the middle of the night, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he had cut his legs so severely there was blood everywhere, and they had to put him up on a table and sew him back together. Arnie did that. And so I've seen some crap, but you know, when you go on these things, you have to be so careful. And there's no medical help. I mean, thank God we had the help we had, and they could evacuate him, but they took him back to Mangareva, and they put him on, they actually displaced a person on the plane, because there's only one plane twice a week. So he had to wait, and they put him on the plane, sent him back to Tahiti, immediately took him to the hospital. And all they could do was stabilize him. And we all have evacuation insurance. It's all required when we go on DXPeditions like this. We require anybody on the team to have medical evacuation. Now, the trouble is that sounds good in practical. Like if we needed medical evacuation from Beauvais Island, they would just laugh at you. So, but anyhow, there was a nurse that accompanied him all the way back to Atlanta, Georgia, until he was admitted to a hospital.
Wow.
So
What a disappointment for him too.
oh yeah, and he's a great guy. He really is. But he does so much work too. If you knew all the work he does.
Hey, Craig, how strong were the winds when you did have the storms? I mean, you're so exposed there. Thought it would have blown all those antennas down.
Well, you know, I think we did a pretty good job of, you know, first of all, we were already high, so we only went up 20 feet, which is high enough, you know, if you're already up 200 or 300 feet above everything else. So, and I would say steady 30, you know, 25 maybe miles an hour with 30, 40 mile an hour gusts. It wasn't so, I mean, I can tell you it was rattling the roof, but it wasn't anything really god awful like at Beauvais. We had 80 mile an hour winds when we were on that boat. I thought we were going to die, really, yeah, when we were down there. So I've experienced some really bad stuff. This wasn't bad. It was just ugly for 3 or 4 days. And when you're trying to operate, you know, I mean, we all operated. I mean, it's just so you understand it, ham radio is fun, but when you do something like this, it becomes a job. And you report for duty, you do your job, and you have as much fun as you possibly can. But you got to trek through mud. You're going to get dirty. You're going to get tired, and
Yeah,
it is what it is. So
Yeah.
but I don't want to make it sound like it's a bad thing. It's a great experience, but you just got to be prepared for that. You got to be physically, mentally prepared for that 2 weeks that you're going to be there.
Yeah.
So,
I've seen photos and stuff of when they did Navassa
right.
and the conditions that the facility was in when they got there.
Yep. I was there.
You were.
yes,
I was there. I was on Navassa.
So you know what the conditions were.
I know
like.
exactly. I know everything. It was unbelievable. And, you know, I have so many memories of all these DXPeditions. It's just incredible. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And in fact, if you guys ever get a chance to do anything like this, you really, really should do it. You'll remember for the rest of your life.
I would just like to be heard by one once. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Well, I guarantee you, Paul, I will work you. All you have to do is just be up above the pileup a little bit. And I always, with that flex radio screen, you know, you just look up there, you see that little signal up there. I always go up there and say, oh, he's calling us. And I work that guy.
Now that I saw the results you were getting from FT8, you got the smaller stations have a good chance with that too.
Absolutely, absolutely. But I always tell the smaller stations, don't hang in the pileup.
Right.
Please just go above the pileup. Now, the trouble is when I work somebody up there, the pileup will follow you up there. But I come back right down. So then I wait until I see a weak signal. I listen up there and I work anybody. Almost anybody on the DXPedition will do that. So
Cool.
just keep that in mind. You're
Good
running
tip.
5 watts or
Yeah.
Can
Because-
you make some comments on radio noise on Pitcairn? What
yes, I
do you
can.
experience?
There's 2 types of noise when you're on a DXPedition. There's man-made noise on this island, and it was significant because we were trying to do moon bounce, and as you can imagine, you need a pretty quiet area to do that. And when they shut off their generators, we all of a sudden could hear significant, I'm going to say maybe 1 to 2 S units better. So you're looking at 5 to say 12 dB improvement, signal to noise ratio. Now it changed by frequency. So depending on what band you're on, but on 6 meters, that's enough to cover up a lot of stations that you want to work because they're all in the noise. When you're working, it's just like FT8. You can work some very weak signals that they're below the noise. And of course, on the moon, we're using JT65, which is part of the WSJT suite of modes. And you use JT65 and it's sending tones. But if the noise is sitting there and when you go, you can't see the sync line for the JT65, you're just not going to copy them because your radio's you got to be able to sync and decode. So anyhow, there was man-made noise. And we just found every night after 10 o'clock when they shut down the power, life was good. There's also what I would call tropical noise, and it's just atmospheric noise. And sometimes that just sits there and it's, I don't know how to describe it, but boy, it's not nice. But it'll just come and go. It'll just come and go. And it's just kind of in the tropics. You'll hear it. And my first experience with that was when I went to, I was on Cocos Island, which is by Costa Rica. And I just thought we would do fantastic because it's straight south of North America. But it's shocking how much noise occurs, the closer you get to the equator. But anyhow, the signals are very strong usually, and they overcome it. It's just when you're working weak signals that it becomes a real issue. So, but of course, we deal with noise, like my own contest station, noise is propagated. Everybody's bringing home noisy devices, and they're installing them in their houses. And of course, you've probably noticed if you're in a residential area, how your noise is just creeping up and over the time of your life. You've just watched QRN getting louder. So that's the way it is.
Thank you.
Yep.
What
All right.
what output powers were you using? Was it a kilowatt?
Yeah, we for the most part we tried for 1500 watts, but frankly we didn't need to do that. So a lot of times we would be 1,000 or less. It was easier on the fuel consumption. And when you operate 1500 watts, it really will drag down a 6,000 watt generator when you key it. So it's better to throttle back, and the higher the bands, like 20, 15, 12, whatever, if they're open, 500 watts is more than enough. And then the amplifier is just sitting there, the generators just kind of are running. Now I won't say idling, but they're not jumping and causing power changes. So we would quite often throttle it back and conserve fuel. We actually had a lot of fuel left, and we just gave it to the Pitcairners when we were all done.
What brand amplifiers did you use?
Those were ACOM. ACOM has sponsored a lot of our DXPeditions. We've used several varieties I've used ICOM, I've used Elecraft KPA 500s, a lot of them, but on Amsterdam, this Palmyra, Beauvais, we had all ACOM, and we had the because you're actually on a band, you know, you say, I'm going to be on 40 meters, you just tune it for 40 meters. So we didn't need auto tune amps. So we've become very good friends with the guy that owns ACOM, and he's been very generous to us. And what he does, and maybe some of you guys have benefited from this, when we get back, I unbox those boxes. You saw those, because the reason they're in a wooden box is because they don't allow cardboard on these islands. So I have in my container, I keep all of the way that they were packed, the original boxes, everything. We repack them in the plastic and everything. And he says, this is the price we need to get for them. And we sell them at literally cost. And I get it, I let it out. You know, I tell everybody, these, and I have sold every amplifier. Now, DX Engineering sells the same amplifier. So they know for a while there, they're not going to sell amplifiers. But the DX Engineering will send those amps to us because ACOM supplies DX Engineering with the amps. But that's how it works.
Cool.
It's a good way to get an expensive amplifier at less price after a DXPedition. And he guarantees them. He says, I'll give you a year warranty from the day you get it.
Nice.
That's very nice.
Yeah. It's those antennas too that DX Engineering made.
Yes.
Those are everything they make that's out of aluminum just is amazing.
Yes, it is. I agree with you.
You can tell that on the other side of the building, they build performance racing stuff.
Oh yeah. Well, NOAD is the owner, and you'll never find out what he has at his station. Let me tell you, when we were on what island were we on? We were on Palmyra, and I'll never forget. 10 meters was dead, and it was his last band. And it comes to find out, he had eight element Yagis aimed at us.
God.
Oh.
Now think about that. Just imagine the tower, you know, H frames all the way up, you know.
Oh.
I mean, but he's got all the gear there that, you know, that you want. You can have it made.
Yeah. Wow.
He's a pretty impressive guy. Yeah, it's interesting if you go to Dayton, or where is it at now?
Xenia.
Yeah, and you go into the booth and pretty soon there's this guy standing over to the side. He's the owner. You know, that's the guy. And he doesn't put a badge on. He doesn't do anything. He just stands there, so kind of watching activity and seeing what's going on. But he's really a genius with his racing products, and actually his distribution system is amazing. That's what's really made DX Engineering.
I swear that sometimes they have shipped me stuff the day before I knew I wanted it.
Yeah. It's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Summit Engineering, Summit Racing. Summit Racing is
Right.
actually DX Engineering. So
It's kind of nice to see the DX Engineering site on the Pennsylvania border.
no.
If you're driving down the turnpike. I remember the first time I saw that. That's why, did you see that? She said, yeah, I saw that. That one, and my wife said, I wonder what his wife thinks.
Well, you know, that one site that you see is K3LR.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the site.
nice. That's
That's
right.
Tim's place.
Duffy.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yep. And he's a really nice guy too. So anything else for the good of the cause? Glad to answer it. Glad to talk about it. We can talk about anything.
Greg,
How long do those guys live? Who live on that island? What's the longevity?
Well, that guy died. He was like 90.
Oh.
90.
That's
So I would
average.
say
life.
pretty healthy, you know.
What if they need surgery? How do they do that?
They have to go off island. If it's anything serious, I mean, guys have died from things that we know we could get fixed.
Sure.
There's just no way.
what do they do?
They have tried to take those longboats, but those longboats are really never intended to get all the way to Mangareva. And you're still looking at, you know, it took us 32 hours in a big boat.
Mm.
Mm.
What do they do for a living on the island?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, they're subsidized by, they're part of the British Empire, British Commonwealth. And New Zealand is their, where their governor lives. It's a she, and she visits them only on occasion. And if you go on YouTube, you can search Pitcairn Island and you'll find pretty soon a visit by the governor. And they get $1.5 million a year, I believe is how they're subsidized, $1.5 million to $2 million, you know, to maintain generators or whatever. But you see the police force, the teachers, obviously the pastors. They had 2 visitors and 2 kids there of the 37. So you're really down to about 20 people. And they only had like 3 or 4 kids that could be schooled. Because what happens is the kids get older, they go to college in New Zealand, and then they don't come back.
They don't come back.
And so they actually advertise right now, and that's why this visiting couple was there. They were from Sweden with their 2 kids. They were thinking about living there. I'm not sure that they would have, but they were the lady was selling, you know, souvenirs, and the husband was helping. And what they did, they paid them all, I believe, $18 an hour or $20 an hour, something like that. So if you had a job, but the thing is, the jobs were erratic. So like Andrew owned a hardware store, and it was open 2 days a week. And he would open it for 2 hours, and everybody would be there. And he sold all of the LP gas on the island. He did whatever. And he was an entrepreneur. Plus he had his pizza business. But you know, what are you going to spend it on? So if they ordered it, like you'd see an Amazon box there, the Prime is not 2 days there. It's they would order it, and then they had to wait for it to come by boat. And the boat only, I believe they have a quarterly deliveries now. So that brings in a lot of their food, and that we drank all of their beer, if I remember right.
I'll teach them.
Yeah, we brought beer, and then we found out that they had beer, and we bought their beer, and then we found out who owned or ran the store, and then they would open the store for us. It could be 10 o'clock at night. We could make a beer run. So. But that's how they make their money. It's just kind of haphazard ways of doing it, and a lot of them it's souvenirs. I have a replica of the Bounty, wood carved. I think I paid $200 for it, you know, so that, and they sell several of them a year. So I think we almost all of them bought them to try to help them out, you know, and we brought toys for all the kids. We brought parts that they wanted. We just donated. I bet you we gave them $1,000 worth of stuff or more that they needed, you know, parts for engines, spark plugs, whatever they needed. We always try to do something like that if there's people we can help anyhow, but we found out the kids didn't have any toys. I mean, they were the same toys. So we do stuff. They do not want you to, they're very proud people. So we were actually going to donate a radio to them and all that kind of stuff. And we were completely discouraged from doing anything like that. So it's the way it is. We quietly did that with Meralda, and we had the antennas. For some reason, they thought that was okay. We gave that one guy there, we gave him a 40-meter antenna. We gave her a 20-meter antenna. So.
Okay. All right. If anybody else, then thank you very much, Craig. This has been fascinating.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed seeing you guys, and we'll see you in the Indiana QSO party.
Yeah.
Is that right?
We're going to try. That photo behind you, that's your station, right?
Yeah, that's my that's my ground right there.
Yeah.
Since you were there, Paul, I bought this farm here too.
Right.
Right above it.
Another 20.
Oh,
acres.
nice.
Yeah. I put the receive antennas the last 2 years right here.
Very good.
So it gave me a little bit more room.
Yeah. Craig's got a few antennas out there on
Yep.
the farm.
And I got a Luso coming this summer. I have a 80-meter Yagi I'm gonna put up.
I was going to ask the vendor, the company that made the switching stuff you used on the island, is that the same one that does your antenna switching stuff there?
No, my switching stuff, I use a lot. First of all, the automation, I use Green Heron Engineering.
That's what it was. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, which is Jeff W2FU, Green Heron Engineering. The software's free, you just got to buy the hardware pieces. But I use a lot of his stuff because it's wireless, eliminates the wire, eliminates getting hit by lightning and having it go through all the wires and burning things up. So I use a lot of that. I use Ham Plus for the 12x4 antenna switch for the contest station.
Okay.
I use a lot of 403A and Flex Radio stuff. They're completely integrated. So.
Very cool.
Yep.
All right, sir. Thank you
Okay,
very
well, I'll
much.
let you
Enjoy your
guys
weekend.
go.
And
We'll see you in the Indiana QSO party. It's coming up soon,
Absolutely.
right?
absolutely.
70 degrees, guys. Good
All
night.
right.
I'll leave and you can carry on and discuss whatever you want to discuss.
All right. Good night. Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
thanks.
Right.